Welcome to the Montana Historical Society's Homeland Gallery. I'm Christine Brown and I'm standing in front of our Homesteading exhibit. Some of the funniest, hardest, saddest, most optimistic, most tragic, and just plain good stories about Montana happened during the Homestead era. The homesteading era was a period in Montana history from the late 1890s to the early 1920s when thousands of people came to Montana to become farmers and ranchers. Three important elements brought about homesteading in Montana: rain, railroads, and the U.S. government. An unprecedented rainy cycle made the state into a green paradise in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Railroad companies completed rail lines from coast to coast and advertised Montana farmland to the world, and the federal government gave it away for free. Wait, what? Yes, it's true. Since 1803, following the United States purchase of the vast Louisiana Territory, the U.S. federal government favored opening western lands for farming, forcing Indian tribes onto smaller and smaller reservations in the process. Then, in 1862, Congress passed the first Homestead Act, allowing citizens to claim 160 acres of free land for farming. An acre is a piece of land a little bigger than a soccer field, but smaller than a football field. It used to be the amount of land a person could reasonably plow by hand with a team of horses or oxen in one day. At first, 160 soccer fields sounds like a lot of land, and it was a good amount of land for farmers in the Midwest where it rains all the time. But in dry Montana, it turned out to be not nearly enough land to raise animals and crops to support an average family. Which is why, at first, very few people took homesteads in Montana. There was much better land available in the Midwest. But the Midwest soon filled up, and changes in the laws in 1909 and 1912 made proving up or gaining ownership of the land much easier. The 1909 law increased free acreage to 320 acres, and the 1912 law reduced the time to only 3 years. Railroad companies promoted the opportunity through advertising, making terribly dry Montana seem like it was the perfect place to grow corn and melons and tomatoes. To gain full ownership of the land, homesteaders had to improve the land by building a house, planting crops, and fencing. It sounded easy enough, but it wasn't. It was hard, back-breaking labor, all done with horses and heavy iron tools. In just a few years, more than 82,000 homesteaders moved to Montana. Homesteaders with a little money built tiny houses, while many lived in tents at first. Winters were long and cold, but because you only had to stay 5 months of each year on your claim, many people moved into town for the winter. Some homesteaders came to build a life. Others hoped to make money for a few years, sell the place, and move on. They were young men, whole families, and single women too. They came from all over the U.S., Canada, and from all over the world, drawn by railroad advertisements. Here's one written in Polish. Sadly, fewer than half of the homesteaders were successful. Most people didn't have the knowledge or experience to cultivate the dry land. Others were successful for a few years, but when the rain stopped and they lost their crops to drought and grasshoppers, they couldn't survive and they left. Many interesting objects in the Montana Historical Society Homeland exhibit illustrate life on the homestead in the early 1900s. The cast iron sulky plow, often referred to as the sulky or by its company brand name the Oliver, was essential equipment to Montana's early homesteaders. The plow allowed farmers to uproot the densely packed native grass and prepare the soil for planting crops. This plow was a step up from the walk-behind type plow because the farmer could sit on it while directing 3 or more horses pulling the plow. Homesteaders plowed millions of acres of native prairie between 1862 and 1917 only to find that the semi-arid climate dried out the topsoil rapidly and it blew away with the first strong wind. Stores like Sears and Roebuck would ship almost anything a person could want by train, but most homesteaders didn't have much money to spend. That's why they called the catalog the wish book. Instead, they raised most of their food, cut down trees and milled wood to make furniture, and made their own clothes and household textiles like rugs, blankets, and curtains. Women and young girls did most or all of the sewing, knitting, and weaving. This counterbalance loom was built in 1916 by Jack Vida for Finnish immigrant Amanda Perala Kraftenberg, a homesteader in the Korpivara community near Belt, Montana. She made woolen items from the sheep they raised and sheared, including rugs and blankets. Can you guess what this enormous tool is? It's a vegetable cutter used for cutting cabbage. Tobias Schreiber of Calumet County, Wisconsin made this slicer or kraut cutter in 1909. Every fall, the Schreibers harvested dozens of heads of cabbage. After slicing the cabbage in half, they rubbed the head back and forth over the sharp blades in the center in order to shred it. They filled a 25-gallon crock with the shredded cabbage, sprinkled in some salt and caraway, and in a few weeks they would have sauerkraut to last another year. There's much more to learn about homesteading days in Montana. Chapter 13 of Montana Stories of the Land offers a rich array of homesteading stories. And if you visit the Montana Historical Society in Helena, our Homeland exhibit offers a glimpse of many other tools and objects essential to homesteading. I'm Christine Brown at the Montana Historical Society. Thanks for watching.